I'm pretty excited about this extensibility that MCP brings to the table here. It allows us, frankly, to talk to other types of people. And it allows us also to talk to people who might not even know they're talking to ClickHouse. They're just talking to some data sets, right? So one thing I've learned while researching all of this space is that the thing with MCP is that there's a lot of opinions out there about it, right? But there's not much real, I guess, feedback and experiences from running MCP in production. However, in my daily interactions with our users, I have these conversations with people who are facing real problems there. So we thought it would be cool if we bring these folks here to talk about their experiences with MCP. All right, so it's a pretty crowded stage, as you can see. And I'm really happy today to welcome this panel here to talk about real-world experiences. So model context protocol is a very viral kind of term. As I said, like a lot of opinions exist out there. I was reading something on Hacker News last time before going to bed. By the way, you should never do that, actually. But that was just me. And someone was saying that MCP is one of these technologies where there's like more blog posts than actual use cases. I cannot disagree. I mean, on a daily basis, you see like these blog posts popping in, and very few real insights from running it in production. So the thing that these folks here on stage have in common is that they are productionizing these use cases. They have actual feedback, they have actual users, finding value, but also hitting walls sometimes, hitting problems, adoption issues, maturity challenges, and that's what we will talk about today. So here on stage, we have Alan from RunReveal. Alan is the co-founder and CTO of RunReveal, a company that helps users answer questions on top of their security logs to do detection and to do incident response on top of these. We have also Chris and Johanan. Chris is the co-founder and head of product, and Johanan is the product manager in charge of building AI applications at FiveOneFour. So FiveOneFour is the company behind Moose. I don't know if you tried Moose, but it's a very cool product. You might have found these little cards on your chairs. These guys are responsible for that. And Moose is an open source TypeScript and Python framework for building analytical backends on top of technologies like, guess what? ClickHouse. And then we have Mike Driscoll here from Rill Data. He's the co-founder and CEO of Rill, and he spent over 2 decades as a technologist, entrepreneur, and investor, working on data in different shapes and forms, I guess. And Rill is a cloud service for what they call faster dashboards. And as you can expect, if the word faster has been used, is that there's some ClickHouse behind the scene. All right, and then we have Mihir. Mihir is a PM for our ClickHouse Cloud, helping to develop the internal data warehouse capabilities and what you saw earlier. All of them are running production workloads using the model context protocol. I want to add one precision there. We're not talking about MCP as like technology. We're talking really about the intersection of MCP and analytics. That's really what we care about. That's also really what we feel a bit authoritative to talk about. And my questions to the panel today will start on very simple kind of adoption journey. So Alan, for example, can you tell us a bit more about your use case and what you use ClickHouse for to start with?
Sure. So again, I'm the co-founder of RunReveal. We're a security data platform with the goal of helping security teams manage their security logs. And so their security logs come from lots of various SaaS applications, audit logs primarily, and with tons and tons of different schemas. So the way these columns end up being represented in ClickHouse is just having very wide tables that don't look at all alike. And so when we got started, we actually tried doing SQL generation from natural language. And ultimately, like, it got right about 80% of the time, but that 20% was enough frustration for folks because they couldn't one-shot a SQL query that we ended up just like ripping it out. fast forward a year and a half, I read about Model Context Protocol in November, and already I'm pretty excited about it because most people at this point have just been copying and pasting massive like blobs of text into their LLMs, which is a security nightmare, right? And so we didn't want any of our customers doing that, naturally. So I read about MCP and I'm like, great, finally a standard, but a little bit of hesitation there. But ultimately, we had a customer come to us and say, hey, when are you guys supporting Model Context Protocol? And so we're like, we'll try it out. And so we eventually built it. I dug through the documentation, tried to figure out how to do it. We ultimately ran with the standard input, standard output, which is a pretty common way to do Model Context Protocol. And now, once we released that, we gave it to our customers who are still fairly technical. They're using it every day for investigations. And that's phenomenal, just to see security engineers who don't like writing SQL, who have all of this data that they're trying to manage and get answers out of to get to like the end of an investigation and see what's happening in their environment. Just be able to ask in a natural language and have that multi-query experience that you were talking about and get to an answer in just insanely quick time. So really excited for the future of MCP and how we're building it today. So,
how much hand-holding you have to do when you onboard like a user on this?
Yeah, so that's kind of where a lot of the friction comes from. So we're also working on a remote model context protocol for RunReveal that integrates some other tools. But there is like a barrier of entry, which is authentication. So we have to make sure that the authentication is bulletproof. Whereas running it locally, it's kind of a pain because you have to download and install a binary, and it's talking through standard in and standard output. So there is like a bit of a curve there before people can be productive using it. But with time, I think we'll be able to allow people to connect remotely as well. So really excited to see that ClickHouse has that today. So
since you mentioned like this binary that you need to run, I guess you're a security startup, right? A few weeks ago, there was a blog post named the S in MCP stands for security. So as a security professional, what's your take here?
Yeah. It's pretty contentious right now among security professionals. There's been a lot of like anxiety around people just plugging in all of these MCP servers and just going hog wild with like pulling in all this data from different data sets that, and more importantly, exposing data from the company to other endpoints. But I'm pretty optimistic about it, and the reason why is because MCP provides this standard interface where there's an audit layer where you can actually see the data that's being exchanged with the model. But perhaps even more importantly, it doesn't require exposing all the data in your data set to the LLMs. It's only exposing the pieces that you need in order to do the investigation to the models. So overall, I think like a lot of the speed bumps will get worked out, and the folks at Anthropic are obviously just brilliant. So, and the community, like obviously it's not just Anthropic developing this. But I'm optimistic that overall we'll have a pretty good experience in the security space for it.
Thanks. So my next question is for Chris and Johanan about your journey to MCP, because you operate in a very different space than Alan, right? So you deal with data engineers that are implementing analytical pipelines, I guess. So what was your entry point to MCP?
Yeah, so like you said before, Moose is an open source developer framework. It's really designed for software developers more than data engineers, actually. And it's designed to make it really easy for any software developer to build a best-in-class analytical backend on top of awesome analytical infrastructure like ClickHouse. And what we were kind of fascinated to find is that when you provide abstractions and a great developer experience via a framework, not only does it accelerate human developers, it also makes agentic and LLM developers far more effective at their job. And so we've been kind of running with that learning and building out Aurora, which is our AI data engineer and AI analytics engineer. And what we found was we were burning a lot of cycles on how do we get this agent in front of our users in their existing workflow. And this is where MCP and the standard there has been a huge unlock for us, where we can build a single interface, an MCP server, and our users can suddenly use our agents very easily from their IDE or from their AI chat, wherever they're already interfacing with LLMs. And I think this kind of lowering the barrier to entry for both producers of AI agents and consumers of AI agents is why the MCP standard has been so popular, and really we're seeing a ton of interest and adoption across the marketplace.
Do you have any feedback from your early adopters, like any anecdotes, anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, we have fun stories. I'll let George go first.
Okay, I'll share a couple stories from the health and fitness industry to start with. So this one comes from the everyone else circle that he showed up earlier. So one of my friends works at a boxing gym. It's quite a large boxing gym franchise. He works in their IT, but he also literally gets punched in the head for a living. So not the typical OLAP user, but one afternoon I had an opportunity to try set him up with ClickHouse. We installed ClickHouse locally, and then we used our Aurora MCP to Vibe data engineer connections to his booking platform and his CRM. He was able to go to his CEO with a Claude chat, and the CEO immediately asked, who are the trainers that are making me the most money? There was 3 trainers that were making him so much more money than everyone else. And then he was able to ask one of my favorite questions that you can ask an LLM with access to a database, which is, what were the correlates between those 3 people? And turns out that they all went to the same training program. So he obviously sends all of his boxing instructors to that training program, and within a month they had a measurable increase in their revenue per trainer. So this shows you that building MCPs, using MCPs is not just about looking at data. It can give you real actions to do for any business that can help you change the way you do business. There's not just small gyms here. Our first customers and one of the largest gym franchises in the world, F45 Fitness, used our MCP tool to help do data engineering between their ClickHouse, connecting it to Strava to build a Strava integration. So in an afternoon, we were able to build that integration. We did it locally. We made a PR. We went through the SDLC and approved the PR, merged to production, and that afternoon, thousands of their users were not only able to do workouts, but to push it to Strava, so it actually really counted.
Nice.
I'll give one more example from the enterprise, which is we're working with one of the biggest telcos in the world. We had the opportunity to sit in a room with some of their executives where we'd put a bunch of network operations data into a ClickHouse database and put an MCP on top of it. And we got to watch these executives ask questions live of their data. And they were blown away, honestly. Like, it was so cool. And there were a bunch of examples, but the one that really stuck with me is one of the VPs asked, if we were to consolidate 2 of our network rings to maximize efficiency and reliability in our network, which can you recommend some rings that we should consolidate? And the LLM thinks for a minute, it calls the tools to query the data, and it comes back with a couple suggestions. And the VP literally starts cracking up, and she says, not only is that first one the right answer, but we are already in a multi-million-dollar project right now where we are consolidating those 2 rings. And not only that, but it took 6 months of our network designers analyzing the data to determine that that's the project that we should run, and your LLM just did it in like 10 seconds. So it's wild what you can do when you put the sum of humanity's knowledge in an LLM and then give it the specific context of your actual environment and let it loose.
Sounds like a huge investment decision, and that raises another, I guess, question here, is that how do you deal with trust in that case? Because we know that models can hallucinate, and it's hard to tell if you're not trained, if you're not like a technologist to really kind of dig and maybe read the query or something like that. How do you deal with that with your early adopters?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is you wanna show the receipts. You build trust by showing the receipts, or if you're a user, you ask for the receipts. And unlike when you're just chatting with an LLM and you get an answer and you don't know where that came from in the neural network that sits behind that LLM, when you're working through an MCP and you've got tools and agents, those agents can show the data, like show the proof. And I think you saw this in the ClickHouse demo we saw up there a minute ago. Like when the agent runs, it's going to show you the SQL query. It can show you the data that's actually backing up the insight that it's given. So the LLM may hallucinate some crazy insight on top of the data, although we've seen that's more and more rare. But the actual data is always there that you can go back to check the receipts and build trust.
Great, thanks. So my next question is for Mihir. So you developed this internal use case at ClickHouse, Dwayne, which we all use and love. And the adoption was wide, as we saw in the numbers earlier. So what are your impressions from running this use case in production for 3 months, roughly now? And do you have any tips or gotchas for people who want to do the same?
Sorry, what was the last part of that?
Do you have any tips or like any gotchas?
Yeah, I think impression's been positive. Like I mentioned, I used to get a lot of requests to write SQL queries, especially kind of when we had a big meeting or external meeting. Have lots of meeting kind of requests late into the night asking me to write SQL queries, and that's slowed down quite a bit, which is kind of cool to see that people are able to self-serve a lot more. I think in terms of tips goes, I'd say providing context is still really, really important. Like at the end of the day, you still need someone to like really own a piece of data or be kind of the human who has the human context behind data. So before we kind of release any of these, or before providing access to, before giving this kind of MCP server access to more and more data sets, we had to write some pretty long kind of context docs for each of them, telling them like, hey, this is what this data set is about. This is what the columns represent. So I think it's still important to have that context because otherwise it can produce inaccurate results and it won't know that it's producing inaccurate results. So that's kind of a scary position to be in as someone who wants to trust in AI. So I'd say that'd be a tip, I think. And then I think the other tip I'd say is make sure you have kind of good AI, I guess, like observability into the responses that are being given. So ideally, like you should be able to see all the prompts that people are prompting your server with, so you can kind of see what are the most common queries. So kind of internally, we have a dashboard where we can see like every prompt that comes in, and we can see like how long it took, kind of what question was asked, which user asked the question. So I'd say like make sure you have that kind of observability in place if you are the person who is going to be kind of administering this server in your database.
And given the adoption of Dwayne internally at ClickHouse, are you worried of automating your job away?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've wondered about this. I think it does automate aspects of my job away. Like it makes it easier to do basic data analysis, and that's honestly a relief to see because I didn't really want to answer like 10 different questions every day asking me to write basic SQL queries. So I think it is nice. I think, but at the end of the day, like you do data analysis to make decisions, and so you want your data analysis to be actionable at the end of the day. And so the person doing the analysis needs to be able to own the results of the analysis and needs to be able to take action. So whether that be kind of hiring more people or doing a new kind of marketing strategy, you still need kind of humans at that step of the process to actually take an action based off data. So I think having the skill set of being like an analytical person, being able to look at data and see what the trends are is still going to be valuable. Maybe SQL, having to know like deep SQL might be less valuable, but I think humans are meant to analyze numbers and data and make decisions from it.
And finally, what's your advice about like the governance, but also the distribution of these MCP capabilities within an organization? How do you recommend companies take?
Yeah, I mean, with ClickHouse specifically, we provisioned a database user for the MCP server, and then it, like initially only started with letting this user only access one table, seeing how that went, and then we added another table. So you can kind of go slowly, and you can lock it down pretty well. So I'd say kind of be more cautious, make sure you have the observability in place, and manage permissions for the user that kind of this MCP server is using.
Thank you, Mihir. And finally, with Mike, since you manage Rill data, which is like, as I said, one of the fastest BI experiences available out there, I guess your users interact with the data. They're probably already happy with the speed. So where did this MCP requirement came from?
Well, I think like a lot of great product features, they often don't come from inside the building, they come from your customers asking you things. And so the inspiration for our MCP was we have a CTO of a health tech company in Chicago who is a power user of our dashboards. And we see that in his observability logs. He looks like he's a bot. The number of clicks, thanks to ClickHouse, he can do a lot of queries in a short amount of time. But I think his goal was to expand access. So, we talked earlier, I think someone said, it's about being obsessed with the time to insight. Certainly a fast database can accelerate that time to first insight, and that's important. But I think what MCPs offer is this expanding the access to insights. So it's not just about the speed, it's about the number of people who can get access to insights. And I think we're seeing MCPs catalyze this shift from insights accessible by code. If anyone's ever seen Alexei write code, you'd think, well, gosh, we don't really need UIs. We just have Alexei on the command line. It's good enough. That's like he can incant magical spells and get answers back. For another class of folks, it's clicks. And for a long time, I think the dominant interface for insights has been clicks. BI as clicks has dominated. I think what MCPs offer is a shift to conversation. And let's face it, not everyone can learn how to use, even GUIs can be overwhelming to folks. Even our dashboard, which we claim is very intuitive, can be overwhelming to folks. And so this MCP server we built was a way to make insights accessible through conversation. And I think there's really three things that, a lot of great things happen sometimes at the interface of technology. It's kind of like the Reese's peanut butter, adding peanut butter and chocolate and you get this amazing combination. I think the reason why ClickHouse is such a powerful technology to combine with AI is you really have kind of three things you need for good AI. I think one is you need semantics. So the AIs, the world models have semantic knowledge. Sometimes in the organization, you talked about adding metadata. I think it's really important, for good MCPs to actually decorate your tables with metadata. The CTO told us that our MCP wasn't working as well because the semantics weren't there. It was looking at the wrong tables. And so we needed to add that extra semantic layer. So I think the semantics of internal knowledge matter, and then that world model matters too. The second thing is speed. Conversations, no one thinks of intelligence of someone that waits a minute to answer a question. So having ClickHouse brings that speed, which I think is essential for conversational, for MCPs, for agents, you can't wait. And then I think the final thing is scale. People have talked about context windows. You talked about the security issue. You can't shove 43 terabytes of data into a context window. You've got to put that somewhere exogenous. And so having the scale that ClickHouse makes available with that speed, along with the semantics, with the context that large language models have, it's an extremely powerful combination. And I think any of us who've tried that have just been amazed at what's possible. The first time we hooked up our MCP, it actually gave good results. It gave insights. The question they asked was, why are conversions down during this week, a few weeks ago? And the MCP did root cause analysis. It went through dimension by dimension, and it was able to pinpoint a set of root cause factors for why conversions on their platform were down. And I think you shared a similar example. So it works, and that was our aha moment, and we've now built it into our product as well. We hope we can leverage the MCP server that ClickHouse has built at realldata.com/MCP. You can download it and check it out.
You mentioned the importance of the semantic layer, and I know you have a semantic layer in real data, as a feature, but more taking a step back, where should it sit? Is it like a client-side thing? Is it the user-provided thing? Is it a database feature that we have to start thinking about?
In my opinion, I think the semantic layer should be as close to the data as possible. Semantic layer is a word a lot of people use. No one really has different definitions, but I think the most important semantic layer is really the question of how do we turn tabular data and database tables into aggregate metrics. So something like revenue. revenue doesn't really exist in an orders table. It's the sum of price. And it may exclude things like refunds, right? So that definition needs to live somewhere. Today, it often is embedded in the BI tool, which is not a great place because if you want the finance team and the marketing team want to get the revenue number, they might be looking in different BI tools and there can be disagreement. So I think if you can push the semantic layer as close to the database as possible, I think that's a win. And frankly, that's when AI agents can talk to ClickHouse and get some of those semantic insights directly from ClickHouse rather than some kind of other system.
And my final question is, how do you see now the future of BI now with this like kind of interface shift that's happening? What are the implications for the industry, but also the direct implications on your roadmap? Like, have you deprioritized things for that?
I mean, I think anyone who's been playing with these technologies, that, I think I saw Martin Casado today said, if you wondered what it was like to be in San Francisco during the .com boom, this is it, right? For any of us who have started to work with these, LLMs, with these MCPs, it's real, it's authentic, it's so clearly gonna unlock tremendous amounts of value. So I think everyone's roadmap, if you're paying attention, has to be all in on, how can we align our roadmap with taking advantage of this stuff. So look, I don't think it means that code does, GUIs didn't make command lines go away. I don't think that MCPs, conversational AI will make dashboards go away, but it will certainly change, dramatically change their role in the same way that GUIs changed the role of command line interfaces.
Thanks. So finally, to wrap up, I'll ask the same question actually to everyone, so it makes it easy. And we have represented here, as I said, like 3 spaces. We have software engineering, analytics engineering, or data engineering. We have security analytics, which is really close to observability, I guess. It's a subset of observability. And we have business intelligence and data warehousing. So for these 3 groups, what would be your advice to like teams that are just starting the MCP journey? Where should they start?
Yeah. So being the security guy, I'm going to quote Spider-Man and say, with great power comes great responsibility, naturally. So just, for folks adding MCP to their stack, like obviously it's got direct access to things. You want to be vigilant and treat it as like a library or a dependency in your software stack. Just make sure that you trust it, make sure it has the security controls around it, but also like be optimistic. It's going to superpower workflows for every team, and don't be afraid of it, but be responsible.
So I'm a product manager, so I'll give the opposite advice of the security guy. I'd say go for it. Like, honestly, my advice is go try it out. It's probably way easier than you think. You saw in ClickHouse Cloud, it's straight in the UI now. If you're using open source ClickHouse, you can use our Aurora agent and start chatting with your data with 2 lines in your CLI. Try it out. And then the only other thing I'd say is know that the insights and kind of the benefit doesn't stop with what we call the ad hoc analytics, like having the chat. You're likely going to want to go to productionizing those insights then, turning them into an API endpoint, turning them into a materialized view in your database, turning them into a data pipeline or an enterprise data product. And for that, there's a whole world of value if you can leverage MCPs to bring AI agents to bear on co-piloting with you on that kind of productionization path once you get past the ad hoc analytics. And if that sounds interesting to you, please go try out Moose and Aurora, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd say, don't forget SQL. I think SQL's, I think it's still incredibly fun to query data. I think when you get into kind of like a focus mode where you're like really analyzing data, I think that's where a lot of insights also come from. Simply being told that the data says something or the data has some trend isn't as rewarding as being the one to actually kind of go in and write queries. So I think kind of getting into the weeds still is important. It's an important part of the process.
Yeah, I guess I would say the most important thing is to be willing to experiment and fail and see things not work because things are moving so quickly that if something hallucinates today, if it makes mistakes today, the models are changing so quickly that if you wait until the AI, the agents, the LLMs are good enough to achieve some goal, you've kind of already missed solving some of the other problems around that. So I think you just have to kind of trust that the world is moving in a direction and kind of build products that will eventually converge with where the world is going to be, frankly, not in years and months.
Well, with that, thank you very much, everyone, for the great insights. I hope you've learned something. I hope you're going to try out these agentic workloads in your own setups. It's actually very easy to use and to compose, so it doesn't really require a lot of effort, and will get easier, as you saw in our demos. Thank you very much for sticking with us, and hand it over to Tyler for the rest.